cases became a big issue for political reasons. Unfortunately, there's a huge amount of politics in all of this everywhere. I think that unfortunately, science is difficult and you can't be partisan. I think that there was a dynamic here, and a dynamic which I found very anti-scientific, that led to decisions being made. The World Health Organization has a record of exaggerating, and I think they do this deliberately because they feel that the public won't pay attention. The total number of excess deaths reported by a website called Euromomo up till today is 160,000, maybe 170,000. Basically, that's about the same number of people who died in an excess way in the flu season of 2017-18. So basically, my guess is it's going to be maybe 1.5 times more excess deaths. Excess deaths are very important because if I'm very sick and then I'm labeled as a corona death, that's fine, except I won't die again next month. So basically, if you look at the total deaths, each person is only counted once. Whereas if you assume that everyone who dies of corona is extra, you're overcounting.
One of the challenges is that when people were looking at all the numbers that were coming out of the TV and they were doing the death rate, the case fatality rates, they were looking really, and this is I'll call it a rookie 101 mistake in epidemiology, and that you don't take the incident rate to figure out case fatality. You look at the prevalence. And it was stunning to me that all the media would put on these so-called experts and not raise this issue as to why the case fatality rate is just completely and absolutely overstated. Yes, we as citizens need to be responsible, and we need to think about what we do and how it impacts those around us. But we shouldn't be so fearful that we decide to live in a bubble and hermetically seal our home in hopes that we never get any more diseases ever again. That's just nonsense.
I would submit that we're pivoting towards a time now where we have to ask ourselves our questions about who are we? What is our country? Are we losing personal liberties? If we're going to use contact tracing, what does that look like? Does that look like a voluntary use of our phone? Or is it going to be involuntary? Are there going to be drones that swoop and watch us? We need to be very careful because in the end, when we're all said and done, we're looking at a respiratory virus, a single-stranded RNA virus. We've dealt with these before. And we know that 40 to 50% of people who get it may not even know they had it. We know another 40, 50% that get it will skate through it. We know that we're probably going to, at the end of the day, end up somewhere between 1 out of 1,000 patients dying from it.
It's interesting because when I was doing the research originally, I remember in late February, I was watching every day because I'm concerned that the death rate shot up 600% in one day. And I'm no epidemiologist, but that didn't make any sense. I'm talking about the world death rate. And then I dug in and finally found a little asterisk that said they changed the diagnostic procedure to no longer having to do a test. This is as late as February. And that's why the number of deaths shot through the roof, because anything they suspected as COVID, they listed as COVID. And then a few weeks ago, as I know you know, and the CDC made it formal in the US that you don't need to do a test just if you suspect it. But there's actually, even as I understand from you, economic incentives by the hospitals, and some have been reclassified as COVID-19 deaths after the fact. And what is that financial incentive, if you'll share with us?
We were basically being advised as physicians as to how to correctly complete a death certificate if COVID-19 was involved directly, or perhaps even presumptively or probably or peripherally involved. I was coached and massaged to utilize COVID-19 as a factor in the causation of death, even if I hadn't checked a COVID-19 test, even if I hadn't had an interest in one. And right around that time, Dr. Birx from Washington, D.C. was saying that nobody's going to die with COVID-19. If they have it, they're dying of it. And that was about as silly a thing as I had heard, because if a person gets hit by a bus and over the first 2 hours of examination in an emergency room, we learn that both of their lungs are collapsed, but also some baseline laboratory works addressed the fact that there was a low hemoglobin, but also a COVID-19 test happened to be positive in the PCR form of it. It would be absolutely ridiculous to put down COVID-19. On the one hand, part of my life is in the trenches practicing primary care, and then I come down to the Capitol where I see this partisan battle for power and the best way to sometimes just to keep people frightened and then tell them who to blame. And after you've done enough of that, then sort of step up and raise your hand and say, but follow me, I'll take care of you. That's sort of a typical formula in the world of politics. And I think sometimes when these things happen, we don't recognize them at the time. It's when we looked at them through the retrospective scope. So I really think the crisis is pivoting.
If you look at the case fatality rate, the number of people who die who get it, it's over 3% when you get to 70 and over. That's a real risk.
Yes.
You look at 60 and under, it's less than 0.2%, or about less than twice the flu. But really what you need to do is protect people who are over the age of 70. Protect them from the risk they would have if they were exposed to the virus, because they're in that 3 to 5% death rate from getting the disease. On the other hand, most of the economy is driven by younger people, 95 to 97%, and they don't need to be protected. We made that mistake early on in looking at the data from China, and we will probably come back and regret it, but you could really open up the whole economy and not have much increase in the risk. The problem is, without the economy open, we're having more deaths of despair than we are deaths from the COVID virus.
Now what we're seeing is the collateral damage of COVID is way outweighing the disease itself. I can tell you about suicide cases personally, 23-year-old. I can tell you about anxiety, depression, alcoholism, all in my community that are skyrocketing now because of COVID. So I think the conversation has to switch now to how do we get the economy going again, because the collateral damage of the economy shutdown is becoming far worse than the virus itself.
We took a Hippocratic oath to do no harm and to tell the truth, and we looked at our numbers, and we had some of Stanford's preliminary data was out. We're looking at these different studies, and we're saying, well, the epidemiology of this disease is similar to flu. And have we ever shut down for flu before? We haven't. Does it make sense to shut down the economy, to have folks, not have work, not be able to support their families? The influenza is a very dangerous disease. I've had folks in their 30s and 40s die from influenza when I used to work in the ER, so was Dr. Erickson. Influenza is very serious, but we are familiar with influenza, so we say it's just the flu. So whenever you have something that you're unfamiliar with, you have lots of fear, and then trying to change people's narrative, their mindset with new data is very, very difficult because they have that old mindset.
I'm an infectious disease physician, and my sort of understanding of and I also do disease modeling, and my understanding is a disease like this sort of spreads quite widely, and so the numbers didn't quite add up, and so that's why we put that study together, and we sampled a group of well over 3,000 people. We used a test kit that by now has been vetted very carefully, and we know exactly what it tells us. One thing that I was hoping that our study would do is reduce that uncertainty. We were living with such an enormous amount of uncertainty, and I think that uncertainty was really getting people worked up. And like many here, I wish this were not a political issue. I wish this were an area where we could come together and say, okay, we need to count all-cause deaths because the coding is not something that is reliable. We need to understand the issue about immunity. We need to understand the issue about the age distribution and the differences across ages. And these are some of the very key priorities that will help us really learn how to deal with that. We have to start wrapping our head around and making decisions in a more informed way.
The whole purpose of this is to honor those that have already put their lives on the line for us. So many doctors and nurses. I cried just thinking about it. So many police officers, first responders, people driving trucks so that we can still have our livelihood and our life and be with our families that get taken for granted. I know most of you don't take them for granted, but I hope in the midst of this, we don't lose track of all that they've done for us. Please remember, we human beings are pretty damn resilient. We've been around 200,000 years. We've experienced every kind of change in the environment, every kind of microbe, every kind of challenge you could imagine. Here we still stand, for better or worse, hopefully for better. And just remember, life, it's meant to be lived. And sometimes we can get overcome by the drama, by what we see and hear every moment, and by dealing with real challenges that we forget that this life is still meant to be lived. So whether it be winter, spring, summer, or fall, whether it be in tough times or good times, I hope you'll find gratitude and joy and love with the people that you love, and you'll continue to grow and continue to expand. So no matter what happens economically, what happens in the environment, there's a quality of life waiting to be lived and enjoyed by you by just finding things to be grateful for in the midst of challenge. That's, I think, how we stay resilient. That's how we keep moving the ball forward. That's how we serve our children, our family, and our friends. So live fully, live with passion. And hopefully until we meet again, God bless.